In 2018, Belize's forest cover stands at 59%, but deforestation is still taking place across the country, even within some protected areas. When these forests are cut, burned, and converted to land, the carbon stored in the forest is released into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. It is a growing issue across the world, and in 2014, the Wildlife Works Carbon reports that over 300,000 hectares of forests were being cleared out every other day. This accounts for 16 to 20% of global emissions. Deforestation affects the climate, weather patterns, wildlife, and ecosystems. While Belize's deforestation rate is only of 0.6% per year, the last couple decades it has been documented that in areas where there are increased developments, the deforestation rate is about 4 times higher. So as the world seeks to slow the pace of climate change, Belize prepares for REDD+. It's a United Nations initiative to reduce emissions from deforestation and forest degradation.
The REDD+ is like a strategy that the country could put together. My perspective is an economical strategy that deals with the forest to see how we could manage our forests in a more wiseable way in order to get some benefits too. More benefits that could be from an economical perspective, but there are additional benefits that always biodiversity gives us to the country. So, I mean, Belize is a vulnerable country to climate change effects. I mean, you're being impacted by hurricane in the past, and for sure you will be impacted in the future. So we have our forests standing. It will help us to be less vulnerable.
So how does REDD+ work? By not cutting down their trees, developing countries like Belize will reduce its own emissions. Under REDD+, countries that continue to preserve large areas of forests, plant new trees, and use their forests sustainably can also get paid or investments from industrialized countries. So how does it work in practice? Forest areas with good potential are identified, mapped, and quantified, and communities decide if they're interested in developing a REDD+ project. A carbon baseline is then generated and sold on the market. Now Belize is preparing to see if it meets the requirements for REDD+.
And right now I could say, because I've been doing this in many other countries and I'm aware of what the other countries are doing, that Belize is in a very unique position. International gurus of the forest are actually expecting or looking what we are doing in Belize.
But for this to work, all stakeholders, including farmers, government, the scientific communities, NGOs, international partners, and other agencies must work together. One of the areas of contention across the world is that REDD+ infringes on the rights of indigenous communities who live in and around these forests. So to educate and engage partners about REDD+, the grievance and redress mechanism will be made accessible through surveys and other tools.
This grievance and redress mechanism will be the mechanism for first of all, the project to engage with the local communities. If there are queries about the project, that the major groups can ask these questions which they have. But also if there are complaints, that these complaints are handled properly. These are assessed and investigated, and some kind of, we try to get a solution beneficial to both parties. It will act as an early warning system. So if you let these problems linger, it may just become very costly to solve it in the future. So that's why you need an early warning system to make sure that all the parties are treated well within the REDD+ process.
Belize will also need to have the legislation needed in place for the implementation of REDD+. Consultant Leonardo Masai is spending 5 months in Belize to analyze local regulations and to make recommendations.
Drivers of deforestation are different. So we are talking about legislation in the sector of land tenure, legislation in the sector of spatial planning, legislation in the forest sector, legislation in the area of biodiversity, and without forgetting framework legislation which is present in the country, such as environmental strategic policies, environmental impact assessment, but also low carbon development strategy which is present in Belize. All those are framework policies which are needed and which are already in place, which is of course a very good thing. So our task will be just to check also whether secondary legislation is in line with those and with their plus implementation.
Reporting for News 5, I'm Andrea Polanco.